Hello everybody, I'm Ryan McNeil, and this is the Builder by Day podcast. Today I am meeting with a friend of mine and the managing associate broker of Keller Williams Select Realty and business associate, Susan Young.
Thanks, Ryan.
You and I are just going to chat on general real estate related stuff. Now, we've known each other for
20 years.
like 20 years, yeah. Mm-hmm. And we met in the real estate world. We were both real estate salespeople in the real estate community, right? Mm-hmm. We won't mention any names. We won't talk about previous places where
we were at the same previous brokerage.
We were at the same brokerage. Mm-hmm. And we both got started in the real estate business around the same time.
Yep.
Back when fax machines were still being used.
Yes. Yeah.
Right?
Didn't have emails on our phone.
That's right.
I know.
We didn't have any of that stuff, right?
Had to go in the office to check my emails.
Yeah, I was carrying when I first started in the real estate business, my first like big boy phone, a grown-up phone was what did they call it? A Trio? Is that what it's called?
I don't know.
You remember it was BlackBerry? That's back when the BlackBerries had the little
I got a
roller dial things on them.
Yeah, after I started real estate. So that was the big deal when you could get your emails.
Big deal,
yeah.
I was late to the game anyway. Everyone had, smartphones in their hands and were typing on the screen. I was hanging onto that keyboard. Remember BlackBerries had like a physical button keyboard?
Why are we aging ourselves? Let's
We're just showing our experience.
Yeah, okay.
We're just showing how much experience we have. So you and I met in the real estate business. We were both real estate sales people. Mm-hmm. Your husband, Chris, we should also mention, is in the real estate business with you. Mm-hmm. And you and I are in the real estate business together in a more of a formal setting as a team. Right?
Yep.
The McNeil Young Real Estate Team. And you're the big wheel in that team, though. I'm just the guy. I'm just the guy behind the guy. I'm the guy behind the woman.
So we both belong to the same brokerage. Everyone has to belong to a brokerage in Nova Scotia. And so we're at the same brokerage. However, you and I and Chris are on a team. So we're the McNeil Young Real Estate Group. That's so right. We're considered one entity under the same umbrella. So that's how we differentiate rather than being designated agents as individuals. We are one group.
That's right. Mm-hmm. We team up to strengthen numbers.
Yes. Right. Well, you're very busy building homes.
Correct. And you're very busy selling those homes.
Yes.
Right? So that's great. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'll explain to those who are listening to paint a better picture. You handle the sales side of the Stonewater homes that we sell.
Correct.
So when for a home that is built on land and it's being sold and there is property changing hands, then that's your world. Mm-hmm. For the folks that we build with that where they own their land already and there's no property changing hands, then that's a little bit different scenario. So I'll explain this just a bit for anybody that's listening. When there are sort of two separate things. There's a scenario where, as home builders, where we build and sell a home that's on land, and so we're selling a property, right? That's a real estate transaction. And then there's a scenario where we are hired by somebody who already owns their land, and we build a home for them on their lot, and we have at that point a contract. But we're providing a service at that point, and there is actually no real estate transaction. Do you want to talk about the distinction between salesperson and associate broker or broker?
Yeah, so it's just a different classification of your license. So you have to have your license through the Nova Scotia Real Estate Commission. So we're all licensees. However, about three years ago, I took my course for broker. So it's a higher class of license. Mm-hmm. So I just have a managing associate broker. So every brokerage has one broker. And in our case, we have over 280 agents. So we have several managing associate brokers. So I work with Anna Silva, who's our broker and one of my mentors.
Yeah, and in other places in the world, they refer to, oftentimes, they refer to real estate agents as brokers. They use different terminology.
Yeah.
But here, a broker is something different from a real estate agent or a realtor. They're both simultaneously, but a broker has different responsibilities.
Yes,
right?
Yes, absolutely.
Significantly different responsibilities.
Yes.
If they're an actual managing associate broker or the actual broker of the brokerage.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I often explain it to clients as saying it's like it's almost like a school and you have a principal. So you have one principal in the school and you may have several vice principals. Sure. And then to me, a salesperson is like a teacher. So they have a certain class of license and then broker and the managing associate brokers have a different license.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
I've actually never seen anybody use that analogy. That's good.
I think it's
Did you
good
come
too.
up with that all by yourself?
I did actually, and Chris makes fun of me for it. He says
I think it's an excellent analogy.
Yeah.
It's an excellent
that's how
analogy.
I describe it. Yeah.
That's good. So that's it in a nutshell. What we are and
Right.
how.
Well,
we know one another.
you're more on the you're involved mostly in the new construction aspect. There's also resale, which is a huge component of my real estate business. And
It'd be a bigger part of your business.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
It's a bigger part of really any salesperson that's involved in new construction, unless they're just exclusively in new construction.
Right.
There's far more resale than there is new construction sales
Yes.
in general.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Bigger business. You work a lot with military folks and
Yes.
Canadian Armed
So
Forces folks.
Chris served for 29 years in the Navy. So I've had my license 20 years. He's had his real estate license, so he's about 18 or 19. It's a little behind me. And yeah, he's had a lot of military connections. So we definitely have worked a lot of military. Also do RCMP as well. So
Okay.
yeah. It's one of my niches that I really enjoy. But I always say that for military clients, like when they're listing their homes, it's some people choose to sell. Military are told to sell because
Sure.
they're being posted.
Yeah,
so
right.
they're
Right.
going or they're coming. So helping them buy. Yeah. So it's a different niche. There's different elements to just the process, and they are Brookfield relocation and stuff like that. So yeah, but I really enjoy it.
That's
and
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, military moves like they're on a mission.
Yes, yeah.
Right?
They're not kicking
not
tires.
thinking about it?
Nope.
No, they're
no.
doing it.
They're
They're
coming
doing
in
it.
for 7 days, and they're like, I want to see this many houses, and they're looking, and then they're making a decision. So
When the military folks reach out to you, just a general question, because I actually personally I haven't done a lot of business with military
Mm-hmm.
moves, and I've built quite a number of homes for military folks
Mm-hmm.
and RCMP folks and local police officers, but not so much on the resale side of things. But when they reach out to you, do they generally have, they know where they're going and they know what the community where they want to be? Are they sort of a little further along than perhaps the average person that contacts you?
so it depends on where they are in the process. But I would say, because they could know they're going to be posted, but once they are posted, they get a message that says you have to be here. Like, so you're posted to Halifax, your 15 July is your COS date. So once they get their posting message, they know they're going, they're told. So I would say even prepping someone for a military when they're listing their house, we may get things ready, but we don't actually put the house on the market until they've received their posting message. Because, you would say it's probably 90% sure that they're going to get it, but until they actually have message in hand, you don't want to put your house up on the market for
Well, that makes
sale,
sense.
and then the military changes their mind.
That makes sense. One thing that I've seen over the years, and you would see this as well, is that when you're working with resale clients, and then they perhaps can't find what they're looking for from a resale perspective, so they consider new construction. And what I've seen many times is when they go from resale to new construction, their demand list changes, right?
Yeah.
Their want
Yeah.
list changes
Yeah.
because they go into new construction, they see what is in a new home versus, say, a 25-year-old home.
Yeah.
And now they want all of those things
The bells and whistles.
for the same price as the 25-year-old home. And that's always a tough thing to manage because clearly you're not going to get that.
Yeah.
Right? You can't have all things being equal. You can't have new construction for the price of resale. Just the math doesn't.
That's why when we talk about average prices too, that's why new construction is typically higher than resale, right?
Well, new construction drives the market.
Yes.
Right? No matter around the world, doesn't matter. It is new construction that ultimately drives the market price and values and so on. Without that, it would be an entirely different thing. If there's no new construction.
Would that be because that's the actual cost to build the house, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, at some level, it's economics. Here's what it costs to buy it, and here's what it costs to build it or
Yeah.
replace it. I guess
Yeah.
replacement value is kind of how you look at it. But so of course that's new construction is always going to be pulling the value forward.
Yeah.
Because if not, the only thing that would ever make any resale home worth more would be just strictly supply and demand.
Yeah.
Right? There's no other driving factor other than new construction. So I always tell everybody this. If you could get all things being equal, if you could get a new home that has all of the things that you're looking for the same price as a resale home, Why would anybody ever buy a 25-year-old home that probably needs roof shingles and perhaps a new furnace?
Yeah.
And right. So new construction always has to come at a premium. It's no different than new cars versus used cars,
Yeah.
really.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a difference there because,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course, cars aren't a depreciating asset, so it's a different story there a bit. But, if generally speaking, everyone would love to have a new home for the most part. Unless it's, again, you want to be in a certain community, it's an established community.
Right.
Maybe you want to be on the peninsula of Halifax and
Right.
good luck finding new construction.
And again, that to me is it. I think of big trees when I think about established neighborhoods
Right.
and an older home. It's based on trees, big trees versus new construction doesn't have.
And some
the
people don't
big-
like being around construction. I don't blame them, right? If you move into a new community, you move on a street.
See, I look at new construction and I tell always it's dollar signs. Like I remember when we bought our first townhouse, it was the first set. And as you went down the street, yes, we lived in new construction. However, the price just kept going up.
Yeah,
so
sure.
to me, it was me making equity.
Yeah, that's
in my
generally how
house.
it works. Yeah,
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
move in, if it's a relatively large scale development and it's going to take several years, and you move in
Phase
year
one.
one, by the time they get to phase 4 and they're building essentially the same home that you
Correct.
bought 4 years ago,
Yeah.
the home that you paid $600 for, the builders are now selling for $725.
That's why
You're up.
another reason I like new construction,
Yeah,
right?
you're up.
It's dollar
Good.
signs. Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
new construction is generally a pretty safe investment if there's new construction happening around you and you're buying something that is relatively mainstream and you don't sort of overbuild it and so on. Right?
Well, and again, I think when you talk about pricing here in Nova Scotia too, if we're comparing to other big cities, we're still reasonably priced.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
For
Most certainly.
costs.
And if you
right?
go outside the city, if you go outside of the immediate Halifax area, you can still buy homes in Nova Scotia for $300,000 probably.
Yeah.
Right?
Depends
Maybe
on,
less.
You got to drive away.
But you got to go the distance.
Yeah.
But if you compare that to, say, like a large city center like Toronto,
Oh yeah.
there are plenty of people in Toronto who commute more than an hour. I've heard some horror stories of a couple hour commute each
Yeah.
way. But if you drive an hour from Halifax in regular traffic conditions, you can get the other side of Truro almost. You can go quite a distance.
Yeah.
Let's talk a minute about if you have a first-time home buyer or home buyers, and they are completely unfamiliar with the process of how to go about buying a home. Of course, probably everyone would recommend that they contact a real estate agent. That would probably be the first step.
Yeah.
But how would you explain that to them? How would you suggest that folks approach that?
Well, I think the first step is talking to a mortgage broker or specialist to get your number. Because, I mean, you can be approved for a number that's much higher,
Sure.
but you want to know what your comfort level is. So knowing your budget, right? Because if you don't know that, and then again, going back to your expectations, you could start looking at $800,000 homes, and you could really like $800,000 homes. However, you find out your budget is $600,000. So then when you find that out late in the process, it can be very deflating to people.
Yeah, for sure. The first step is to essentially figure out what you can afford or want to spend.
Correct.
Those two things may be different numbers. Go with the lower.
Yeah.
Right? It's
Yeah.
the lower number you got to go with. Whether
Yeah.
that might be you're approved for 800,000, but you're comfortable with 6, or you're approved for 6, but you'd like to spend 8. Regardless, the lower number is the number that you should target.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. So once they've done that, they have their number. They've spoken with a mortgage broker. They've submitted a mortgage specialist. They've provided the necessary information so they have a proper pre-approval. Then what do they do?
Well, then I like to go through like a buyer consultation to just kind of walk you through and explain the process as far as how things are going to go. Just so you're, again, setting the expectations so you know how we're going to look at houses, when we find a house that you like, about writing an offer, inspections, the difference between financing like for pre-approval versus actually getting the home approved. There's paperwork to explain agency on how a realtor works for you in your best interest and what our responsibilities are to the buyer, what the buyer's responsibilities are to us. So I'd like to explain that. Also, build a rapport with buyers and make them a little bit comfortable, because I often tell new home buyers the story of when I first bought my first home, and I had to have my license for about a year. And it was...
Oh, you were licensed when you bought your first home?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I I remember because it was new construction and the realtor just handed me the paperwork and said, all right, let's sign. And I had this like feeling of panic. Like, it's a big deal. It's a big purchase. So I was like, she's like, what's wrong? I'm like, it's good. So I took Chris to Tim Hortons. We sat down. I treated him as though he was my client, went through the paperwork. We signed everything and then I brought it back. But it's a big deal, whether it's at the time it was $200,000, you know, but to me, it's one of your biggest assets. So I always tell that story because
So you represented yourself in your first
I
home.
did. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Was that your first deal?
No, it wasn't my first deal.
So you were familiar with the real estate process,
right?
just not
but
yourself.
Again, it wasn't me. So like, and I have a huge empathy for sellers now. After when we sold our first house, you know, that prep, getting your house ready that you spend 4 hours doing, and we had
days.
2 small kids, and we were hiding stuff in the dryer and making the house look picture perfect. So
is it still a consensus in the real estate business? People used to suggest that you take all your sort of personal photos and stuff down. Do people still do that? They still recommend that?
Well, yeah. So one of the things that I recommend, I always say you have 2 chances to make a first impression because everybody's looking online now, right?
Sure.
So
Yeah,
so I do think professional photography, having a stager come in, so that's part of our process. Again, as you talked about earlier, it's costs that we take on. But that's one of the things that they would say, because you want people to visualize themselves being in the house. So if they're focused on all of your family photos and pictures and it's busy and they're not looking at stuff, I always say to clients, I'm like, don't really look at their nice furniture because it's not going to be here. Like, focus on the layout, focus on the features, the finishes, what needs to be done. Is it move-in ready?
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's talk about the process. So folks have been pre-approved. They've contacted a real estate agent, a realtor.
Yes.
And they have viewed any number of homes and they've zeroed in on a home now. So now let's talk about, they've found a home and now they're going to make an offer. So can you speak kind of how that process, generally speaking, works?
Right. So for me, the process has worked. I've already signed agency documents with them. And like I said, explained the process. But we're going to write an offer. We're going to then I'm going to give it to the listing agent who's going to present to the seller. Once we negotiate on that process, then I would say we have a conditionally accepted offer. Then you have a due diligence period typically. So it's then doing the steps of doing a home inspection. Are we on well and septic? Are we doing water tests? Are we doing septic? Making sure they have approval for insurance. So I would say to you 7 to 14 days, on average 10 days for the due diligence period, for the buyer to get all of what I would say their ducks in a row, make sure everything's good. Then you would firm the deal up. And then it's a matter of, I told a client recently, I'm like, I can help and advise on everything but packing. So from a real estate perspective.
And when we refer to a deal as being firm, what we mean by that is that all of the conditions of the purchase and sale agreement have been met.
Correct.
Everything has been satisfied, reviewed, confirmed, whatever the case may be. And now at that point, we have a binding real estate contract.
Legal agreement.
Yes. Yep.
Yes.
And at that point, so now you're just waiting for the closing date to arrive, which is the date where the property physically changes hands, and they move out and you move in, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
A typical closing date is still roughly what? Probably a couple of months?
Yeah. Well, I would say 30 to 30 days to 60 days. So on average 6 weeks. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But again, it all depends
change,
it depends on, the motivation, depends on, are you in competing offers, right? So sometimes what's best for the buyer, when you're competing, you want to make it as, for you want to make it as appealing to the seller. So what the seller wants, right?
Yeah, that's right. So that's important, and that would be something that any real estate agent would and should discuss with their clients, even when you're making your offer. So when you're making your offer as a buyer, a few things to keep in mind, of course, is that there's more to it. Your offer is more than just the dollar amount that you're offering. There are other considerations, and the big ones would be the closing date that you're proposing. And what I used to tell most folks is that if you're flexible on the closing date, as a buyer, if you're flexible, then let the seller know you're flexible because that's working in your favor, right?
Yeah.
You're making it as appealing. You're making your offer as appealing as you can to
Absolutely.
them. It's just a form of negotiating to the best of your ability,
Yeah.
right? So you have the offer, you have the price, and you have the closing date, and any other conditions. The typical other conditions would just be things like you mentioned. There would be an inspection process, a home inspection. There could be, in theory, a septic and/or well water
Yeah.
inspection, water tests.
Insurance clause.
Insurance,
Financing.
confirmation of insurance, and a lawyer review, right?
Yes.
You send it to your lawyers review the deal. It's very rare that anything comes back from a lawyer review because we use standardized paperwork in this
Forms.
province. When you're dealing with real estate transactions, people buying and selling homes, like you mentioned, these are huge ticket items. In most cases, I was going to say many, but it's probably most. In most cases, this is the largest purchase that these folks will ever make.
Mm-hmm.
From a seller's perspective, it's perhaps, if not all, it's a very good chunk or the majority of all of the money you have is tied up in your home. So you're trying to maximize all of that. And so, long story short, it can often be a bit of an emotional
Oh, it definitely
time.
is emotional.
Stressful.
Yeah.
It's emotional.
Yeah.
People get, sellers take things too personally.
Yep.
Right? When it comes to selling their home, I've seen it, you and I have both seen it a million times.
Yes.
So I don't so for instance, I'm a seller every day. I sell homes every day,
Yeah.
right? Of course, I've sold my own personal properties over the years. I've moved.
Yeah.
So I've been on the selling end. I've been the person who owns the property, and somebody comes through and they are interested or perhaps not interested, and they have feedback, and sellers always kind of take that personally.
Well,
and-
because it's their home.
That's right.
It's not.
So if somebody gives you some feedback, it was just they didn't like this or they didn't like that. I've seen sellers get kind of standoffish about that.
Yes.
But, hey, I always tell everyone, there's nothing personal about this. This is a transaction. It's a transaction, period, right? You're selling something, these folks want to buy it, or you're looking to buy something, and these folks want to sell it. Now, you want to be polite as possible about it, but I find that people get sort of emotionally tied to
I would
the
tell a
transaction.
realtor that is part of their job. It's extracting the emotion out of it. And again, both parties are always going to be very emotional about it. I mean, I can get emotional for clients. However, we want to be, cordial about whether it's their house smells like cat pee, because I did show a house one time that had so many cats in it that I was like, I thought I was being punked. When you ask
really?
about weird, I was like, whoa, there were cats everywhere in this house. I don't know if they were breeding them or something. Anyway.
You can run into scenarios like that, and you can be, sometimes the emotional part of it can be something that's not even related to the home sale. It's like there's other things
Yes.
going on. Because sometimes, unfortunately, people get divorced, and quite often when people get divorced, they sell the home that they own together.
Yes.
They're going in separate directions.
Yeah.
So that can be not pleasant,
No.
right? So as a realtor, sometimes you're dealing with unpleasant situations.
Yeah.
Right? You're trying to make the best of a bad situation and try to make it as good as you can for everybody involved.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Because again, even when you're helping someone buy, you're trying to take a house and you turn it into someone's home.
Right.
And vice versa. When you're selling it, it's their home, right? And then you're trying to help them navigate through that to make it more of a business transaction to sell their house, to sell their property.
Like anything when it comes to, it's the same thing in the new construction world. If you run into an issue, hopefully what you have is folks that can be rational and empathetic to the other side and come up with a solution instead of everybody kind of losing their mind.
You've said that before. Like, not everything is perfect, right? Sure. And there's always going to be a scenario that comes up, but hopefully we can just work through it, like reasonable expectations, right?
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's important. You mentioned earlier about part of the responsibility for a real estate salesperson is to set reasonable expectations.
Absolutely.
And to make sure that they're kept in mind.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Reminders, friendly reminders. Because again, like I always say, like when I'm working with a buyer, I quickly figure out what they want based on, again, we start looking at homes, see what's available. And, I ask them, what do you like about this? What do you don't like about this? And I can quickly figure out what it is that they're looking for. Now, whether their budget matches their expectations, sometimes we have to have a conversation and talk about adjustments on that.
Ultimately, I think that the best salespeople out there, real estate people out there, are the most informed. And the best thing they can do for their buyers and sellers is to inform them as much as possible so that they can make an informed decision. Because ultimately, the buyers might zero in on a house that they want to buy, and you might think it's not your favorite. It's not the one you would choose out of the half dozen that you saw today, but for whatever reason, they like it the most. And as long as they're informed as to all of the details related to that property and considerations about resale or whatever the case may be, that's really, as salespeople, I think, what is best or most important. Right?
There's also different niches too,
Sure.
right? So you talk about location, that's one. But again, new construction, although it's a residential home, there's a whole bunch of different elements to new construction that differ from resale.
Sure.
Same thing with condominiums. So like if I had a client that came to me and said, I'm looking at purchasing a commercial building, that is, although my license covers to help someone purchase new construction, commercial, that's way out of my scope. That is not where my expertise are. So I'm going to refer to someone who that is in their scope.
Sure, yeah.
Because to me, that's knowing my lane, knowing what I'm good at, and finding my client the best person for the job.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point. And you'll see that whether it be geographically, you'll see agents who perhaps from time to time will kind of wander off into an area that they're not familiar with, and you can pretty much tell that pretty quickly. On the new construction front, we see it often. We see it quite often where you'll have some buyers who are looking to perhaps buy new construction, and their agent reaches out to us and we have a conversation. And not all agents, quite frankly, know anything about new construction.
No.
Right? They don't have any idea how the process works. They're not even familiar in some cases with the paperwork, the documentation that they have to complete. Right? So you know that we often we lay it out for them in very clear, very
which is good.
Clear terms.
It's setting the expectations though, right? So to help someone along as far as just so that we don't have mistakes, right?
And we at Stonewater Homes, we use the standard real estate paperwork that we use here in this province.
Yeah.
We don't have our own proprietary contracts or documentation, if there's property changing hands, we do it this way.
Yeah.
If it's a contract to be built on the homeowner's land, it's a different story. But I think most builders in this province do that. There could be exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, most home builders selling new construction here in Nova Scotia use the standard documentation and paperwork that is offered, or is used by the real estate community.
Yeah.
Right.
And then they have their own schedules to
Correct.
it. Yeah. And again, every builder does things a little bit differently.
Right.
So again, it's sometimes knowing the nuances of that. So again, part of my role as managing associate broker is helping realtors in our brokerage navigate that stuff. So even though, I haven't dealt with every builder, I've had experience based
dealt with
on
a few though, yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
for
you've
over
dealt with a
20
few.
years.
You're definitely at the top end of experienced real estate salespeople, realtors in this province when it comes to your new construction experience.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to, again, I've aligned myself with people who've dealt with new construction. So,
And every builder is a little different.
yes.
Every builder has a different process and a different way of doing things and some different documentation and some different answers to, two different builders may answer the same question in two different ways.
Correct.
Could be things like making changes or site visits or anything like that. It's going to be different from one builder.
Right. And that's what when I give guidance to another realtor, it's just asking the questions. And hopefully you have a good listing agent, someone who's representing the builder who can answer those questions for you because they know the process. They do it all the time.
Yeah.
It's the same thing from the Stonewater perspective.
Right.
I know what my Ryan answers are.
Yeah. Yeah, because I answer the questions
I know,
in my world. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
But not all builders do that because some builders, they build more homes. They're a larger company than we are, for instance. So you're never going to speak to the builder.
No.
Right? You're going to speak to the builder's salesperson.
Yeah.
And that's as far as you're getting. There's no step beyond that.
Yeah.
Whereas in our world, if somebody has any questions that go beyond the typical questions that you might have answers to, as you know, we'll say, well, let's just have a conversation. Come on in, sit down. We'll answer any questions that you have, and I'm happy to do that with them. Especially if you get into very technical things, or can we do this, or can we do that, and what changes can we make, perhaps?
Yeah, technical. Overall, though, the questions that come from the public are very similar, right? So once I know what your answer is, and we've talked about it 10 times, then I know what the answer is going to be.
That's right.
Right? And you just, again, guiding people through the process.
That's right. Yeah. You're good at that.
Yeah. Thank you.
because you have the experience.
Yeah. You want it to be, a positive experience for everyone. Like you talked about, it's a stressful process. It's emotional. However, buying a home is a really big deal, right? And again, you're buying a house, but you want it to be your home. So I think there's a huge emotional element to that. And again, it's a huge asset, but I want it to be a positive experience. Just like as a home builder, you want that to be a positive experience.
Yeah.
You don't want to build a house for someone and them not like it, right?
No.
That's why you're very good at designing homes. So even when we talk about a spec home that you say, here's the design, because you're paying attention to the trends in the market and stuff. However, like even how many QE2 dream homes have you built?
Yeah, a few, a number 10, 12, somewhere in that
I think
range.
you're over
and
12.
Counting, and counting.
Yeah. So again, like I even explain that to people in the elements of a Stonewater built home. You take elements from a $2 million build and you've put them in a $600,000 or $700,000
absolutely.
house.
Yeah, well, even in the past year or so, with some of the homes that we built in some of the other communities that are more affordable, we've sold some homes that were, what were they, $550?
Yeah. Wish you had more of those.
Yeah, so do I.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are some commonalities and some common elements in that home that you would see that are exactly the same product and way of doing things that you would see in a $2 million home.
Yeah, in the dream home.
For Stonewater Homes as a custom home builder, and because we build a range like that, a wide range of homes, there are certain things that we do, and there are certain things that I'm just not willing to not do that way, if you know what I mean. There are more affordable ways of doing some things that we do, but I'm not willing to. I don't want to call it cutting corners. I'm not trying to suggest it. It's not necessarily even a bad thing. It's just there are sort of minimum standards that I have that I just can't.
You also don't want to sacrifice quality.
Yes, I also don't want to sacrifice aesthetics.
Yeah,
I know that's not that might not be at the forefront, and that's another point I meant to mention earlier. That's one of the big things when you look at folks that are looking at new construction versus resale. Right, you'll often they can't find what they're looking for, resale perhaps, so they consider new construction. But then you look at this 25-year-old split entry with, kind of aging vinyl siding and
all the work that needs to be done, the dollar signs.
And then they compare that to the home that is built now and it has stone and composite decks and architectural shingles and colored windows and all these things. And you look at those two houses, they physically look nothing alike.
Yep.
Right? And of course this has to come at a premium. But as a home builder, I struggle with, I want all of my homes to look good. I think we do a pretty good job of that. I think when you drive through communities where we build and there are other builders building, folks often tell us that you can pretty easily pick out which homes we've built from the street, right? And the curb appeal is important. And it's not nothing either. It also, that will come back around from a home buyer's perspective. That will come back around when it comes time to sell your home, and you have this very attractive, lovely looking home.
Yeah.
Right. That looks physically more attractive than perhaps something else that might be on the market at the same time that you're competing with however many years later when you're trying to sell. Right.
Absolutely.
So yeah, there are certain things that you could save a few bucks here and there, but
but it's also that's your brand, right?
Correct.
A Stonewater home. So, I mean, obviously you want to build something that you'd live in, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Like that you like the quality
That's right.
of. So, I mean, I think that's very important. And
that
shows in a home, right?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And we build homes that I've said to people before, we build homes that I can honestly say that if we build a home at 500, 600, 800, whatever it is, that's a home that, because I've had people say before, do you, it's a question along the lines of what you said, sort of, would you build your home this way? And it's like, well, yeah, if I was building a $600,000 home, yes, this is how I would, this is what it would look like.
Yeah.
Right? There's a budget or there's a range that you're working within. And of course we can only do so much within that, but.
If you had told me I was buying a $600,000 home 20 years ago when we got in this, well, you could have built a nice big dream home.
If you told me that the average for us, like for Stonewater homes, if you told me that the average home that we were building was going to be in the $1 million range, I would have said,
I know. It's crazy.
That's a stretch. But
We have this recorded now, so we can look back in another 15 years to see when we talk about averages now versus what they'll be in 15 years.
Yes, who knows? But COVID did that, right?
Yeah.
There was a spike. I'll give you an example. So when we were prior to COVID, prior to say 2020, we had probably built, I don't know, maybe a handful of homes that were beyond $1 million as the total price. Up until 2020, there was maybe a handful that we had built. We certainly had done a few lottery homes and a couple other higher end custom builds, but there was normally, it might be sort of one at a time or one or two a year or so on. Then there was a time during peak COVID era, somewhere in 2022, where we had something like 15 houses pre-sold under construction that were between $1.2 and $2 million in the same communities where we had been building those same homes for $650 or $700,000. And it was a combination of a significant increase in the lot prices. That's a big part of it.
Yeah, land.
Yeah, the land prices went up significantly, and then everything else went up. Material pricing, labor, and that all went up, and now it's up. That's where it is. Those are the numbers now.
Yeah.
And of course, there certainly aren't a long list of people with $1.5 million to spend on a home. And I wish that weren't the case. I mean, it's not. I wish homes were more affordable than they are.
On your last podcast, when you were talking to Kyle, he even talked about the average mortgage was $1 million, and now lending rates are lending. They're going to give more because $1 million doesn't buy you what it did 5 years ago.
No,
that's
sure doesn't.
For sure.
Have you noticed with the interest rates coming down recently? Have you noticed? Like, is your phone ringing anymore? Have you seen anything?
So I equate it to, for when you talk about the price point, and let's say the under $500,000 price point. Halifax has had such growth, and the rental options are very difficult for people. Sure, you can get into an apartment building, but if you're a young family, like you have one child and one on the way, and you have a dog, like where you can rent and what you're paying is crazy.
Yeah.
Like, so I find, again,
If
there's
you can find something to rent.
That's because I think rental rates are less than 1% in HRM. So I would say that's why price point, I think, for the same you'd pay in rent, that people are looking to get a mortgage payment for around the $500,000 price point. And that's where the fight has been, for sure. Yeah. Like I wrote recently on a house with clients, we were one of 9 offers. Like my clients didn't get it, but it sold $75,000 over what it was listed for. But it was a reasonably priced home. Yeah. Yeah. So I don't see that going away. And again, you as a home builder would say, like, we don't have the land. Where are we going to put houses?
Yeah, and part of the problem there is that, I mean, there is physically land available, but land development costs are so high now that by the time you're able to bring those lots to market, the cost is very high, but also the time frame to develop land here specifically in this municipality is unbelievably long. Yeah. Unbelievably long. Yeah. Years, right? And that's not years of building roads. That's years of getting approvals and permits, right? Yeah. It's a challenge. There are some challenges here when it comes to that. Yeah. When it comes from a pricing perspective, certainly the time frame to get developments approved, and the time frame to then have those streets built and services installed and so on. It's
time frame of building a house from when I started new construction and when you would have started, for how long it took you from start to finish to build a house versus what it is now.
It's night and day.
Yeah.
The first pre-sold home, I'll tell this story because it's a good one. The first pre-sold home that I ever sold was in Porter's Lake. Very cute little 2-story. It was probably, I don't know, maybe 1,700 or 1,800 square feet on the main 2 floors. Nice little covered wraparound porch, and had a single car garage attached. Just a really cute little house. The closing date was 4 months from the day we signed the contract. We didn't even have a permit yet. Yeah. It was 4 months, and the folks we were building for, they were pregnant. So what had happened is somewhere, I don't remember the exact details, but somehow along there, I got a phone call one day where they were wondering if there was any way we could move the closing date up because she was going into labor earlier, or I think it was the case. So we did. So we actually ended up closing that house in, it was like, 3 months and 3 weeks or something in that range.
That's crazy.
That's insane. When I think back to that, I know I did it.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely certain that was the time frame because for the first couple of years, that was the thing. 4 or 5 months, that was the closing date. And that first one, I know that we closed the home from the day we put ink on the paper to the day they moved in was under 4 months. And that was a house with a well and a septic. So we had to cut trees, clear a lot, build a driveway, install a well, install a septic field, get the house built, completely finished, and move them in under 4 months. It's unheard of.
Yeah.
You could never do it now. That's like made for TV special to be able to do that, right? You'd never do that now. Yeah. Never. Now the closing date, during COVID, closing dates kind of got way out of whack. There were some builders that were, 18 months and 2 years almost. We didn't get that extreme. We were generally still right around 12 months, maybe 15 months in the peak, kind of worst of the time frame. But we were also building some monster houses at that point. We were building these 5,000-6,000 square foot homes, and of course the time frame for that is longer.
Yeah.
But now it's we take from the time we don't start the clock until we have the permit. So we learned that years ago. I learned I can't commit to a closing date until I have the permit in hand because that's beyond our control.
You're out of control. That's out of your control.
Right?
Absolutely.
So we put the contract together and we have all the documentation, and then we sign your agreement and all the conditions are met, as we talked about earlier. And now we have a firm deal. We then apply for the building permit. And generally speaking, hopefully that would take 2 weeks, but it could take 2 months if we run into some kind
4
of
to 6
snag,
weeks. Yeah.
right? Mm-hmm. And then once we have the permit in plan, then we will set a closing date and move from that date forward. And we're typically today, we've dialed it back a bit because, as you know, we sold a few homes last year with 12 months closing dates, and we're moving them up by months. We have some of them that are 3 months ahead of schedule. We can move these folks in 3 months ahead of schedule, which is nice. It's nice when your builder calls you and says, hey, by the way, if you're interested, we know your closing date is not until December 15th, but if you'd like to move in October 30th, the house is ready. And people love that call. The call they don't want is on somewhere in September, you call them and say, hey, we know you're supposed to close the end of October, but it's not going to be ready until Christmas.
Yeah, you
right?
don't
That's
normally
tough.
make those calls.
We don't make those calls.
No. And you also...
Now, in fairness, I will say, during COVID, we had to make a couple of those phone calls. But
again, COVID was that
insane. Right? That was crazy. But
because you literally had stop work. Like you had people that couldn't be
we
in
had
the room.
times, and then remember last year or 2 years ago, we had the forest fires out in Hammonds Plains, and we were building homes, and we physically couldn't get to those locations for a few weeks. So sometimes things happen, but generally speaking, no, we don't miss closing dates. And I'll put an asterisk there too. Quite often, what happens in the new construction world is people tend to forget or not perhaps put any consideration to the fact that when they make changes. See, when we build custom homes, we allow folks to make rolling changes, as long as we haven't gone past a milestone.
Yeah.
So we allow folks to make changes, but sometimes those changes add time. And it's very rare for us, very rare. I don't even know if we've ever done this, where we've said, yes, we can make that change. Here's how much it's going to cost. And here is the additional time it's going to take.
Yeah, because
we generally just make it happen, and we end up sort of selling ourselves short on time in order to go with, I don't know what pick anything. Could be they've decided to upgrade to composite decking instead of wooden decking. Right. Well, that takes a little longer to install, and it's a special order, and we have to wait for it to come in. So there can be some time added there. And really, what should happen is, from a builder's perspective, it should be great. Here's the change you'd like to make. Here's what it would cost to make this change, and here's your new closing date if we do this.
Yeah.
Right. And that's really what everyone should sign off on. We do the first two parts. We always have all of our change orders in written amendments, but closing dates seems to never change.
You also had stated about having the doing the permit first, but when I write a turnkey for you for Stonewater, you buffer in that time, like because you have
in that scenario. Yes.
So because I get a closing date, and that's other than saying, which we're doing now, is saying, hey, do you want to move this closing up? But typically hit that closing date.
Yes. Yeah. So turnkey where there's property changing
but we're
hands.
looking at, again, like when you say 10 to 12 months compared to 4 months. That's crazy.
And we did that for years. And then it creeped a little bit. So somewhere
went to
around
6.
Around like 2010 or 12, we were maybe now doing 6-month closing
Yeah.
dates. And then maybe in the 2017, 18, 19, pre-COVID, we might have been in the 7 or 8 month range. But again, the other thing that changed is that over that same 15-year time period, it wasn't just that, you know, as a building industry, we became less efficient or something. What happened was homes got larger.
I was going to say.
And the finished details and aesthetics and the things inside the homes also changed. So it became solid surface countertops were the norm, and that adds some time. The kitchen goes in, and then they have to template, and they go away, and they come back 2 weeks later with countertops.
Stone on the exterior of the home.
That's right.
Yeah.
And physically larger homes.
Yes.
So we don't build many 1,500 or 1,600 square foot homes now. They're 2,500, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000. So of course, the larger the home, the longer it's going to take to build.
Yeah.
I mean, that only makes sense, right? If the home is half the size, it theoretically is going to take less time to frame and drywall and all those things. That's probably, closing date is probably one of the things that is a deterrent for some folks, that they can't consider new construction because they simply don't have the time. So anything else you want to cover that you think you'd like to mention? Any last minute tips, advice?
No, I guess I would say for someone who's looking to purchase, you should interview a realtor. You should find someone that you feel is best suited for you and can help guide you through the process. Because that's what we should do. We help you find your dream home and guide you through the process. And the same for selling. So I do think experience is important. I also think knowledge is important.
Yeah.
So
that's a good point. I would say, unless it's a scenario where, you know, you have a real estate agent that you've dealt with in the past, or they're a good friend of yours, or God forbid a family member, or something along those lines. And from a seller's perspective, I think more so even on sellers and buyers, but I guess from a seller's perspective, you want to interview a few different salespeople. You want to have a few different realtors come to your home, have a look and give you their opinion, and then, but don't fall into the trap of like hiring the person who gave you the highest, told
price.
You your home was worth the most.
Because that's to list your house.
That's
not to sell your house.
That's the oldest trick in the book,
Yes.
right? That's the oldest trick in the book.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you have 3 different agents come in, and 2 of them say your house is worth 500, and the third one says it's worth 575, and then so your eyes light up, and that's the person you hire. And a week after you put the listing up and nothing happens, they go, you know what, I think we're listed a little too high. We should go to 550. And then another week goes by, we should probably go to 525. And before you know it, you're down at the price where the other 2 more experienced folks already told you should have been, and you wasted your first 30 days on the market. And now you have the salesperson that you hired because they basically outbid the other folks, which is really has nothing to do with it, unless they're buying it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, which they won't.
Of course they won't. Right.
Yeah.
So, but you definitely should do that. And I think the other thing too for buyers and sellers, but you're going to have a pretty close working relationship with your real estate salesperson.
Yeah.
You're going to have regular communication. They're going to be in your home, and you're also going to give them, in some cases, you may give them some very personal information, depending on what the scenario is and why you're selling and where you're moving and all of those things. So it should be somebody that you, just at a human level, you like this person.
Yeah, you feel comfortable with them. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's important. I often say it's like you're dating. So you're calling me up saying, "Hey, I saw a house. Can you go out Friday night? Let's go."
That's right. Yeah, you don't have any plans on Friday, do you?
Oh, I do, but I just jump.
We're the same way from a new construction perspective, from a builder's perspective. People often will say, you know, why should we go with you guys versus these guys, or, you know. And there's lots of answers to that, but one of them is, for a pre-sold new construction custom home build, we're going to be married for like a year plus, right? Because from the time we start talking about the new home and then we move into designing it and drawing plans and so on, all of that takes months in most cases. Then construction takes many months, let's call it a year. And then even after you move in, there's this warranty period where you want to be able to have confidence in who built your home and they're going to stand behind it and so on. So I tell most people, aside from just which homes you've gone in that you like the most, and God forbid you hire the builder who gave you the lowest price. It's the absolute worst thing to do, unless you're very, very meticulous about the details and specs and making sure that everyone is quoting the same thing. But it should be, from a custom home builder, it should definitely be a builder. And I don't mean the individual person, so I don't mean just me, but ask to meet the staff and talk to the person who's going to be holding your hand through the selections process, and the salesperson who works for the builder and all those things. So be comfortable with the team you're going to be dealing with, and same thing on the real estate.
Well,
side.
and that's where my real estate has always been. It's been repeat and referral business. That's where the majority of my business comes from. So I don't have a billboard when you're driving down the Bedford Highway that has my picture up on it. So that's not how I get my business.
Right.
It's based on my reputation. I hope to do, and I tell that to my clients, I hope to do a good job for you so that you will tell your friends and family and that you're confident and had a good experience of buying or selling your home. And then you're going to refer me to your friends.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's right. And, you know, and the strategy for many real estate salespeople is the opposite from you. You know, it's billboards and signs and get their face everywhere. And that works, of course, to get your name out there. But yeah, there's nothing better than referral or repeat business. Mm-hmm. Repeat business is nice. It's the same thing. We've had folks that we've built for, you know, on multiple occasions. They bought a home from us and then they sold that home and then we built for them again. And those scenarios are perfect for all of us because we all know what to expect.
Yes. Yeah.
We've all been through this before. We know what to expect of one another, and that's an ideal world. Doesn't happen all the time, but it's nice when it does.
I don't put billboards up, and I didn't think that I'd be doing a podcast, but look, here I am.
Here you are doing a podcast, and you didn't think you would, and you're doing it with a guy who you thought was the last person in the world that would ever have a podcast. And so here we are. We talked about that before, so I should address that when we were talking yesterday. I'm not a small talk guy, right? So people have said, so what's up with this podcast? You don't seem like the podcast guy. And I agree that if we were, well, let's take an example of maybe the Keller Williams Christmas party, which I never attend, or the
social aspects.
Social aspects. Right? I'm probably never even in the room. But if I'm in the room, I'm probably in the back of the room talking with those handful of people that I know and get along with and like chatting with. I'm not somebody who's going to mingle or work the room.
Yeah.
I'm not a small talk guy, but I love having conversations.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Just a conversation.
Well, and again, you and I have lots of conversations, and that's what you were trying to convince me.
That's what I told you. Just come in.
Do it with cameras.
Do what you normally do.
Yeah, exactly. Because we talk real estate all the time. Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
Every day for the most part, unless you get lucky and you get a break where you don't hear from me for a couple of days.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to cover? Go over?
No, I think that was great. I appreciate this is my first podcast.
And the next time you come in, we'll talk,
my 10-year-old told me, he was like, I don't know if it'll go viral, Mom. And I'm like, oh, at least I'm talking about
we didn't
something.
Do anything. We didn't do anything here today that's going to go viral. No, that's not going to be the case.
I don't even know what that is.
Nothing controversial.
Yeah,
we didn't do anything wild. Right? Maybe next time.
Yeah.
I'll warm you up to the idea of more controversial topics. Right?
Okay.
Okay, good.
Sounds
thanks
good.
for doing this.
No, thanks for having me.
We'll do it again.
Yep, for sure.